to honestly observe the following picture and tell me what this looks like to you. If you said a bunch of cardboard, construction paper, curtain rods, gold tape, and foil, you would be correct. If instead you said the National Aeronautics and Space Administration's highest technological achievement, incapable of being reproduced today, the Apollo 11 lunar lander, then you would also be correct. Most unbiased viewers would assume your average high school art class could construct this contraption without much struggle. But official NASA spokesman and astronaut Don Pettit assures us that actually, this 1969 technology is so advanced that even with their multi-billion-dollar yearly budget, they cannot for the life of them recreate it now.
"I go back to the moon in a nanosecond,"
Don informs us.
"But NASA destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again."
Firstly, why on earth would NASA destroy the original Apollo lunar landers? The historic first crafts that landed men on the moon? The supposed most incredible achievements of mankind, and they irreparably destroyed them so that they could not be replicated even after 50 years? Could it be because they didn't want future generations able to visit museums and see these laughable 1960s attempts at high-tech looking space vehicles? And what other 1960s technology is so advanced and expensive that it cannot be recreated easily and far better now than way back then? Let's take a closer look at this 1960s spaceship and see what else we can notice. For example, look at the paneling here, on the side of the craft. If someone sheetrocked your house looking like this, you would be entitled to a full refund. Yet, with supposedly the best engineers and scientists in the world on the job, this is the kind of craftsmanship NASA provides? Look at the flimsy, haphazard, and careless construction materials and methods used. Look at the buckling, warping, and indentations showing how thin the paneling is. What is this thing? A Twinkie? No, I'm sure it's some super important and necessary high-tech device. Here there are press stubs, and here also has press stubs. But here, and here, they must have run out, so they used gold foil instead. And then over here, they must have run out of gold foil because they didn't bother with either. Look over here at the evenly spaced lines of gold foil going down the legs, until you get to this point where there is 3 lines right close together. It must be important because it's the connection point to the other crossbars, right? Let's look at another leg. Oh, no. On this one, they are all evenly spaced the whole way down. No 3 lines near the crossbar. Apollo 11 mission controller Harold Loden was quoted saying, "The skin on the crew cabin was very thin, and that was all done because of weight saving. If you really took your finger and poked hard at it, you could poke right through the outer skin of the spacecraft. It was about the thickness of 2 layers of aluminum foil." Project manager Thomas Kelly concurred, noting that the skin, the aluminum alloy skin of the crew compartment, was about 12 1/1000ths of an inch thick, equivalent to about 3 layers of Reynolds wrap that you would use in the kitchen. Apollo astronaut Jim Lovell said, "Whenever I saw a model of the lunar module, it had these rigid sides and looked really strong. Turns out that external portions of the lunar module are actually made up of mylar and cellophane, and it's put together with Scotch tape and staples. We had to have pads on the floor because if you dropped a screwdriver, it would go through the floor." Apollo astronaut Gus Grissom even famously hung a lemon on the lunar lander just weeks before the mission started. The dictionary describes lemon being a word used to describe things, especially automobiles, regarded as unsatisfactory, disappointing, or feeble. The lunar lander was never even once tested on Earth, landing here from any altitude before supposedly going and successfully landing on the moon. There, this pathetic cardboard and tinfoil construction allegedly fell from lunar orbit at 4,000 miles per hour, then used retro thrusters to slow it down and safely landed without a hitch on the lunar surface. When the astronauts did practice in other training vehicles, 3 out of 5 of them crashed, and you can see here how difficult they were to control, even in broad daylight, on Earth, in optimal conditions. The idea that the actual lunar lander was never once tested on Earth, but then made a perfect landing on the moon, is one small step for lying Freemasons, and one giant leap for brainwashed mankind. This is a 7,500-pound thruster. Look how powerful this is, how big, how much dust it kicks up, and the light it creates. The lunar lander's thruster was even bigger, at 10,000 pounds, and somehow didn't kick up any dust, left no blast crater under the craft, and not a grain of sand on the landing pads, as if it was gently placed down by a crane in a studio. Here we see the lunar lander redocking with the command module. This is clearly fake and made with props, models, and footage similar to the Hollywood creations of the day, such as Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey, created in 1968, the year before the first supposed moon landing. Look at the jerky, unrealistic motions and lack of thrusters being used. The craft is just being turned like a Rubik's Cube somehow, all of this supposedly happening as they both orbit the moon at 4,000 miles per hour. Since many people can't believe this is genuine footage, let me assure you, this is actual, official NASA footage of the Apollo 11 redocking. And this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to moon landing hoax evidence. If you still believe man has actually walked on the moon, and rovers are rolling around on Mars, please do me, yourself, and the rest of humanity a favor and watch my following presentation, link in the description box, the NASA Moon and Mars landing hoaxes.
You asked the question, what are some of the easiest ways that you can prove that the Earth is round? Because apparently this is something that we're debating. I have no idea why. That's a hard thing for me to even start talking about because there are so many proofs that the Earth is round, it's difficult to know where to start. And it's not okay to think that the Earth is flat. This is not a viable argument.
To begin with, if you truly believe the Earth to be a triangle or a dodecahedron, that is most certainly okay, and you're right to do so. We all have the right to our own thoughts, beliefs, experience, intuitions, and discernment, regardless of how common or widely accepted they are. Telling people up front that having an alternative perspective from yours is, quote, not okay, is incredibly narcissistic, abusive, and an attempt to infantilize the listener into accepting the fallacy of appeal to authority. It is absolutely okay to question the shape of the Earth. In fact, the scientific method itself requires constant questioning and experimentation to reach increasingly precise conclusions. Once a scientific postulate becomes solidified into an unquestionable dogma, it becomes religion, not science. And people demanding your allegiance to their dogma, like Michelle here, are acting far more like evangelical priests than true scientists. NASA themselves have already changed the alleged shape of the Earth thrice in their short history, first telling us we lived on a perfect sphere, then changing the shape into an oblate spheroid flattened at the poles, then changing again to a pear-shaped spheroid bulging out in the southern hemisphere.
I have friends who have been on the International Space Station. They have orbited the Earth once every 90 minutes. You know, I've had personal experience with people that have been up in space and can see with their own eyes that the Earth is round. And of course, we've taken all these amazing pictures from space. They're so beautiful, all those pictures of the Earth. So I don't really know what's going on right now with this Earth is flat thing.
Here, Michelle condescendingly delivers 2 more examples of sophistry, namely hearsay and another appeal to authority. Because she has some fellow Freemason Eastern Star actor-not friends who claim the Earth is a spinning ball, Michelle wants us to accept that kind of second-hand hearsay as scientific proof. Then she laughs and talks about pictures. Pictures like these, you mean? And these? Michelle was directly asked for scientific proofs of her claim, and the first 2 she gives are, because other people say so, and because there's pictures. Well, Michelle, I know you already know this, but people can lie. Pictures can be faked, and neither of those are permissible as scientific evidence. So why are you dancing around the question with sophistry and condescension instead of just providing actual proof of your claim?
There are proofs all around you. It is not difficult to know that the Earth is round. In fact, people have known this for way more than 2,000 years. The ancient Greeks actually had a number of really elegant, wonderful proofs that the Earth was a sphere. One of the things you can see yourself with a pair of binoculars is if you actually go out to a lake and there are boats on that lake, the farther away a boat is, the more the bottom of the boat will disappear, and you'll basically just see the mast of the boat. And as a boat goes farther and farther away, the last thing you will see is the very top of the mast of that boat. And that's because the boat is actually going over the horizon that's curved.
So once she finally gets around to her 3 supposed scientific proofs of a ball Earth, they are all from ancient Greek astronomers who have been debunked since the time they were presented, even way back then. Her first is the dinosaur claim that ships disappearing beyond the horizon hull first somehow prove the Earth to be a globe. The fact of the matter is that the law of perspective on plane surfaces dictates and necessitates this occurrence. For example, a girl wearing a dress walking away towards the horizon will appear to sink into the Earth the farther away she walks. Her feet will disappear from view first, and the distance between the ground and the bottom of her dress will gradually diminish until after about half a mile it seems like her dress is touching the ground as she walks on invisible legs. The same happens with cars speeding away. The axles gradually get lower, and the wheels vanish until it appears as if the car is gliding along its body. Such is the case on plane surfaces. The lowest parts of objects receding from a given point of observation necessarily disappear before the highest. Now, with modern telescopes and cameras, we can prove this as well by successfully zooming in on ships that have gone beyond the horizon and bringing them completely back into full view, hull and all.
Now, another way that you can tell that we're on a sphere is to think about how there's something called the tropics on the Earth. And the tropics are places near the equator of the Earth where sometimes the sun is overhead in the sky. And this was actually something that the Greeks used not only to prove that the Earth was round about 2,000 years ago, but they actually measured the circumference of the Earth accurate to within just a couple percent. There was a really brilliant Greek scientist called Eratosthenes. And Eratosthenes noticed that there was a town called Syene. And on a certain date, the sun would actually shine straight down to the bottom of a well. That meant the sun was directly overhead. You could look down a well and see the sun shining back at you. And on the very same date, farther away in the city of Alexandria, that didn't happen. The sun was not directly overhead. It was a slight angle. And all that Eratosthenes did was he measured the difference in the angle of the sun. And he rationed that that change in angle from one city to another was probably indicative of us being on a curved surface. So another really simple proof is that on any given date, at different cities and different places around the world, the sun is at different angles in the sky. That wouldn't happen if the Earth wasn't round.
For her second supposed proof, Michelle tells the story of Eratosthenes, who noted that at noon during the summer solstice in Syene, the sun cast no shadow, and the rays could reach straight to the bottom of his well. Yet meanwhile, in Alexandria, a vertically standing metal rod cast a significant shadow. By factoring the length of the shadow with his assumed distance to the sun, Eratosthenes recorded a measurement of Earth's circumference close to what heliocentrist astronomers still use today. The fact of the matter is, however, that Eratosthenes' calculations were made assuming the sun to be millions of miles away, so that its rays would fall perfectly parallel even in points as divergent as Syene and Alexandria. This faulty assumed premise led to his faulty conclusion, which was eventually exposed upon the invention of the nautical sextant. Using sextants and plane trigonometry, by measuring the sun's angle at 2 points on Earth simultaneously and factoring their distance from each other, the Pythagorean theorem reveals both the height and dimensions of the sun. Using this method, the sun and moon have repeatedly been calculated to be approximately 32 miles in diameter, 3,000 miles from the surface of the Earth. High-altitude balloon footage has also filmed lighting hotspots on clouds, proving the sun to be local and acting as a spotlight, and not a burning ball of gas millions of miles away as supposed by heliocentrists. After Eratosthenes, the globe-Earth theory completely disappeared from philosophical thought and recorded history for almost 2 millennia. Geocentric flat Earth cosmologies continued to reign supreme, with even Eratosthenes himself, touted as the father of geography, depicting the Earth as flat in his famous 194 BC map of the world.
Then there are some other proofs that are a little more obscure, but they're actually really lovely. And one is to observe what happens during a lunar eclipse. Now, a lunar eclipse happens when the Earth casts a shadow on the moon. What's happening in that case is that the sun is on one side of the Earth is in the middle, and it's casting a shadow. The Earth is casting a shadow on the moon. And as the shadow moves across the moon, you'll notice that the shadow is curved, it's round. So something like the sun that's bigger than the Earth and is able to cast a shadow of the Earth on the moon can actually show you the shape of the Earth.
Her final and most ridiculous supposed proof of the shape of the Earth beneath our feet is accomplished by looking at a light in the sky. That's right. When you ask scientists for empirical, measurable proof of the shape of the Earth beneath our feet, they inevitably turn their noses up to the sky and start talking about the shape of things up there. Imagine inviting a contractor over to your house to measure the dimensions of your floor, and he immediately gets out his tape measure and starts measuring all the recessed lights in the ceiling. To this day, heliocentrists still offer this argument as proof of a spherical Earth, claiming that during lunar eclipses, the sun, Earth, and moon align in a perfect 180-degree syzygy like 3 billiard balls, causing the sun to cast the Earth's shadow onto the moon. This clever but faulty assumption is rendered completely invalid, however, due to the fact that lunar eclipses have happened and continue to happen regularly when both the sun and moon are still visible together above the horizon. As early as the time of Pliny the Elder, there are records of eclipses happening while both the sun and moon were visible in the sky, and continue to be recorded by the Royal Astronomical Society today. Obviously, if the sun and moon are both observable simultaneously during an eclipse, then they are not aligned in a 180-degree syzygy, and it is therefore impossible that the sun could be casting Earth's shadow on the moon, and some other explanation must be sought. Another explanation, in fact, already existed in many cultures around the world, who posited that a third celestial body, known as Rahu, or the Black Sun, also existed, equal in size to the sun and moon. This translucent dark body passed affront the sun and moon during eclipses, causing their lights to dim. But regardless of what causes the moon's lights to dim during lunar eclipses, it has absolutely nothing to do with offering scientific proof of the shape of the Earth.
So people have known that the Earth is spherical for thousands of years. It's not okay to say that the Earth is flat. This is some sort of strange denial. I don't know where it comes from. And it's something where I keep getting this question. We really need to put this question to bed because we've known the Earth is a sphere for a long time. I actually said this to somebody, I couldn't believe they'd never thought of it, that, with binoculars you can see planets. You can see Saturn and Jupiter, you can see Mars with a telescope, the sun, the moon, everything else you see in the solar system is a sphere. So we're the one thing that is different. And that actually made somebody who was more interested in actually hearing information, that actually got them to think. They're like, you're right, everything else we take a picture of is a sphere.
And again with the appeal to the sky fallacy. The only place we see spheres in the sky is NASA's CGI photos and videos. When amateur astronomers photograph and record the stars and planets, here's what we see. Are these spheres? Are these spheres? And even if they were spheres, what on earth does that have to do with the shape of the Earth?
Long before the theory of gravity was a glimmer in Newton's imagination, the natural physics of density and buoyancy already perfectly explained why apples fall down. Quite simply, objects fall or rise based on their relative density to the medium surrounding them. Apples fall because they are denser than the air, while helium balloons rise because they are lighter. No gravity necessary. Everything seeks its relative density and rises or falls until settling accordingly. Now, this has absolutely nothing to do with gravity. Gravity is a hypothetical magnetic-like force to help explain the heliocentric theory of the universe. To claim the existence of a physical law gravity.